Welcome to another episode of the Goodsugar podcast. I am Ralph Sutton. That's Marcus Antebi with a mushroom background, looking through his fourth eye, maybe? I don't know.
Kaleidoscope of
Kaleidoscope
power,
eyes. There we go. And there's a reason for all this. Why? Paul F. Austin, who is a leader in microdosing mushrooms and LSD. We get into a deep conversation about whether you should or you shouldn't, or maybe I will. We'll find out on this episode of the Goodsugar podcast.
Wow, great high pitch.
Welcome to another episode of the Goodsugar podcast. I am Ralph Sutton. Marcus Antebi. If you're watching this on video, there's a reason for his background. And Marcus, it's going to be an interesting debate because this guy comes on. He's got a background in microdosing. He's a big advocate for it. He's got the Third Wave, which is a community of people, and he does seminars. He does speaking engagements all about microdosing mushrooms, microdosing LSD. You have a lot of opinions on this too. I know your wife dabbles in the mushrooms, I think it is, right?
Something like that.
Something like that. So it's going to be a spirited debate, Marcus. Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I thought that was like an opening.
No.
No, I actually took time to write a lot of notes because it is a subject that I feel passionate about. I do believe, that pure plant medicines, not processed ones, like, which we'll go into. I do think that they can be very helpful if a person incorporates those things with their other practices, meditation and
that's why
exercise and therapy and journaling and stuff like that.
So let me say this, Marcus. I wake up every day about a little bit before 6, around 6, maybe 5:45, maybe 6:05, around 6. I wake up naturally. Whenever I wake up. I don't set an alarm. And I have this routine in the morning. There's an hour and a half, which is meditating, stretching, yoga, a light workout. I take supplements. I do all these things. It takes about an hour and a half. And then either I go run or I go to the gym, come back, do my leg compression, feel great. Okay?
Jesus Christ. Look at this first world luxury life that you're living.
Right, sure. So I realize also that I am lucky as shit.
Holy
that
shit.
I get to do that.
My God.
Every day. Sometimes I laugh. Sometimes I'm sitting down laughing with my dumb leg compression boots on. How fucking lucky I am, right? So that being said, I don't know if I'm a candidate, but maybe I'm living in a state of denial.
It's not emotional. I actually think that now on your own, as you maintain the same trajectory, you're headed down the path of just constant expansion, positive of your awareness, improvement of your character, more ability to focus in on the moment and just be present with life and really feel things and be in your ground and control anxiety and your reactions. I think you're actually doing that. This is different. This, for someone like you, could be not just healing in terms of your own traumas and emotions that are repressed or guarded. I think it could be a portal into experiencing different types of reality that are happening simultaneous right now where we only see one. And then what your intelligence does with that is the miracle. It's not that you're just going to go and see like the walls are melting and everything is all.
You come see me a week later. I'm just dancing around the apartment.
It's not that. I mean, you might sit and breathe, and because you've opened this portal through the hallucinations that occur, just to be clear, that's actually what happens. You're in a you're in a different hallucination than the fucking hallucination you're in right now, which feels really real.
Right, which we all know that your reality is very subjective. We're all aware of that.
It's all a hallucination, and it's fine because this hallucination matches closely to the physical reality. Meaning, if a bear was coming at you and you're hallucinating that, it's a good hallucination, and you're going to run. And by the way, if you're being eaten by the bear, you're hallucinating that doesn't feel so good. So, the idea is that what is the next layer of reality that is useful for your evolution to see? It's not about tripping your balls off and getting more deep into Led Zeppelin and then going, oh, I see why they used a bass guitar there.
Right.
I mean, that could be it, but I just think that's pointless for me.
Right.
I don't find that to be valuable for me. Okay. I find that to be not, I'm not being judgmental. For me, that's escapism.
Right. That's the big difference.
Okay?
You got to use it for therapy, not for
right.
escapism. All right, Marcus.
That's it.
Go ahead. All right. Well, let's bring the guy on. Now, it's a topic that's been a recurring theme on this podcast. So I'm fascinated to now get another viewpoint as a prominent figure in the psychedelics world, a founder of Third Wave, featured in Bloomberg, Rolling Stone. It is Mr. Paul F. Austin. Welcome to the show.
Hey, folks. It's great to be here. It's great to be on. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to have a little fun for the next
Sure. So let's just start with your background and how you got into this world of microdosing and where you are today and speaking on this around the world. Just bring us up to speed to those that don't know anything about you.
All right. So the quick, let's say 3-minute overview is started doing psychedelics when I was 19, grew up in a pretty traditional middle-class, small-town, Midwestern family in the States that was very anti-anything illegal. And so, I was sort of the rebel or the black sheep. And those early psychedelic experiences were interesting, profound, transformative. You could put any sort of label on it, but they really influenced me to sort of look outside the box of conventionalities. So when I graduated from college, I was like, I don't want to just go to graduate school or get my MBA. I'd love to do something a little bit more interesting, So at the age of 21, I moved to Turkey, where I taught English. Soon after that, I lived in Thailand, Mexico, Portugal. I ended up traveling to, 60 or 70 countries throughout my 20s. And within that time frame, as I was becoming an entrepreneur, I thought, I thought back to these early experiences that I had with psychedelics. And this is about 2015. I noticed that you had Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan talking about psychedelics, more clinical research coming out of places like NYU and Johns Hopkins. Then cannabis was being reevaluated and had been legalized in a number of states. So I was personally transformed by these experiences, but also as an entrepreneur, I sort of saw the writing on the wall that, in 5, 6, 7 years, psychedelics would be potentially as important, if not more important than cannabis. And so there would be a massive industry that would explode from it as a result. And so I started Third Wave in 2015 as an educational platform because education is legal. Selling acid is not, at least not yet. And so
By the way,
I just started educating people about.
Can you get on a better connection? Like, are you on Wi-Fi or something? Because you keep cutting out.
Do I?
Yeah. Don't feel any stress by that. It happens very often to all of us.
All right. One sec. No, I've been having issues with this.
Where are you right now?
He's in an underground mushroom bunker.
Yeah.
In Portugal, Lisbon, and the Wi-Fi here has not been.
I do love Lisbon. I've been there a couple times. Didn't hear you. Say that again.
Is it better now?
Yeah. Now we can hear you again.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So pick up from that, which was you founded Third Wave. You just kind of pick up from where you were.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I founded Third Wave in 2015. This was when Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss were starting to talk about psychedelics. More in clinical institutions like NYU and Johns Hopkins were publishing research about it. Cannabis was being reevaluated as a substance to be legal. And I, as an entrepreneur, I saw the writing on the wall that this would eventually become a very big industry. And so I started to focus on education and training. And since 2015, we've reached 25 million people with our education.
Wow.
We've facilitated over 1,000 experiences, and we've trained over 250 coaches and practitioners.
Wait a minute. You reached 25 million people, but only worked with 1,000? That seems like a very low conversion.
These are different companies. So Third Wave is a media company. So the focus is on education. Synthesis was a legal psilocybin retreat center that I started in the Netherlands, where we did in-person legal psilocybin retreats. And then the Psychedelic Coaching Institute is a practitioner training company where we do trainings for executive coaches, health and wellness coaches, clinicians, doctors, things like that.
Okay, fair. That's pretty wild. What an interesting background. So let me start with this because I know Marcus has some insight on this. I have tried mushrooms once in my life. We have brought on several different doctors and prominent figures in this world over the past couple of years that this show's been in existence. You're the first, excuse me, who believes in microdosing over clinical dosing. And Marcus, maybe you can, because this is where we get opposite viewpoints and kind of get a conversation going, Marcus. Do you want to chime in on this a little bit on your end first?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on the show. And I've been listening to you deeply, and I connect with you, and I could sense your wisdom and your thoughtfulness and your compassion on the subject. So I think that, for me, I'm sober 38 years, but I've used deep meditation, and I've sat in many ceremonies. My wife has done mushroom ceremonies, traditional setting with shaman who've been trained from the Lakota traditions and things like that. And I have no right to talk about that stuff on podcasts because it's well outside of I think it's disrespectful, quite honestly, for me to talk about it from that perspective. I can really just talk about it from what's logical to me. And I think that this is a good podcast because I think between the two of us, I think we'll bring a very honest clarity. And I only have a couple of touch points, which I just asked that throughout the show I could drop in. So far, the thing that I would do with you is just ask you questions that, might be like microburst questions with microburst answers, right? Or we're good, microdosing, right? So we're talking about like micro, questions. So my fundamental problem with any substance like THC, CBD, or just cannabis or mushrooms or peyote, even ayahuasca and hape, and just make a list of all the sacred medicines. When you just make them available to people as if it's just take this substance and use it the way you would coffee, fail. It's just a giant fail right there. It's over. It's no longer what it was designed to be. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, yes.
I mean, look what just happened in Portland. Do you guys, what is it? That Proposition 110 that's getting revoked, where they made it legal to use certain drug classes. I forget which ones they are, but fast forward a year or two later, and everything is going in the wrong direction. And they just repealed it last week because of that in Portland. So,
which is interesting. So the law in Oregon was decriminalizing all drugs, which they did this in Portugal 25 years ago in response to a heroin epidemic, and it actually solve the heroin epidemic. So I think it's more a reflection on the state of the United States rather than the failure.
Well, didn't they do it in China with opium, and that was a failure also? Am I wrong?
Yeah. They just don't understand. First of all, historically, human beings fuck it all up, right? They just, when they came back to England with tobacco leaves, instead of using that sacred plant medicine the way it was intended, they smoked it and inhaled it, and that's it. Now fast forward to all the diseases and the pandemic that it's caused. And so all of these substances, in my opinion, in my meditations, they all had the correct word for medicine is medicine poison. I've said that on this show before. Mm-hmm. Like if there was a word for that, which is that it's a medicine for some in the right dosage. If it's the wrong dosage in the wrong person, it's automatically intoxicant. So we're just going to call it poison. And so that's the first part of the training that you have to teach the subject. It's not, some magical thing.
It's not a cure-all. It's not a cure-all.
It's not a cure-all.
Correct.
It's what's taught in many in our societies is that it's absolutely miraculous, fantastic, and it's totally harmless. It's just not true. There's no.
Right, I'm guessing, Paul, that's part of the education that you guys bring is that this is not a cure-all. Am I right to think that?
Yeah, I talk about it a lot of ways. It's not a magic bullet. It's not a panacea. It's not the substance itself, because anytime you rely too much on something that's exogenous outside of you, there's a psychological dependency. It doesn't have to be physiological. There's a psychological dependency because all of a sudden you start giving your power up to this external thing. And I think what what you're hitting at is sort of when these sacred substances are brought into this modern industrial context, there is this tendency to commodify the sort of healing powers of it. And we've seen, in Prozac and Zoloft and kind of modern conventional psychiatric medications, how modern research shows that the use of these are actually no better than placebos at this point in time. And so a lot of the worry in the psychedelic space, quote unquote, is that, for example, microdosing will just be the new Prozac or the new Zoloft, that people, if they don't necessarily bring any sort of intention to it, they'll just look to it as another pill that they can take every day that'll supposedly fix their problems. Right. And so it's a tricky balance. I'll give you a little bit of an anecdote. I mentioned I was raised in this pretty traditional family in Michigan. My dad is someone who, has never been drunk, never smoked weed, went to seminary, has had the same job for 40 years at a private Catholic liberal arts school in Michigan, or private Christian liberal arts school in Michigan. When Michael Pollan's book came out in 2018, How to Change Your Mind, I sent him that book to read. He read it, and because of that book, he became open to at least trying microdosing. Again, had never tried psychedelics in his life, so he started to microdose because it was an easier access point. To say, hey, go do 5 grams of mushrooms would have been too intimidating him. But because he started to microdose, a year after that, I was at home with my parents, and he was actually open to doing a high dose psilocybin experience. So my framing on microdosing is not that it's necessarily a replacement. It's not a either or when it compares to these clinical doses. I'm just very pragmatic in that I know that the vast majority of people are not necessarily going to be down to go through this ego death.
So are you saying it's a way?
Well, you're a great entrepreneur. It's branding. You're smart. You're in it.
Well, it's human psychology as well, right?
But
if you want people to take a big step, you get them to take a little step first.
Retail is all psychology. I mean, I think what you're saying is a smart move. You're saying I want to be an entry point for a larger audience, as opposed to, like you said, 25 million people that looked at the product versus 1,000. So there's a different transaction with microdosing. It's a broader audience, and you're going to people who would never look at this stuff. Even before the show, I was talking to Ralph. He said, well, I'd be more open to microdosing, and he's terrified of the idea of a full dose.
It's a way to dip your toe in the mushroom pool, I guess. Is that a fair way to look at it?
That's the metaphor I always use. Like when we learn how to swim, most of us didn't get just thrown in the deep end and told how to figure it out. Most of us, some of us did, but like I started in the shallow end. I could touch my feet if I wanted to. I had someone to support me. And then as I became more comfortable in the shallow end, I went out into the deep end. And I think it's the same with whether it's psychedelics or any practice like breath work or meditation. Like if you want to go that deep into your psyche, start with a float tank, start with breath work, start with, meditation, and then, potentially go ahead and do a higher dose of psychedelics or mushrooms.
Let me ask you this. For yourself, Paul, on a weekly basis, how often are you doing some sort of psychedelic?
Over the last 10 years, I've probably, again, the vast majority of my use at this point in time is microdosing, right? And so, but over the last 9 years, I've probably taken a microdose on average once every 2 weeks.
Once every 2 weeks. Okay, that's not. It's not.
To me, that seems reasonable.
I thought it was going to be much higher. Yeah, that's good.
No, it seems reasonable because when I watched, from my previous business, I'm not going to name names, but there were quite a few people who were into the arts and crafts, so to speak. And I remember someone I knew very well, a good friend of mine at worked at the company, he got some microdose capsules from the local shaman, and the instructions were very clear. It said, set an intention, meditate, and take every other day, because you'll build up a tolerance. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Right.
So so my first assumption is that, if a person is using it like once a week or in greater cases, once every 3 or 4 days, it still seems within the range to not, violate that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's with psychedelics and LSD, there's a 48-hour window of short-term tolerance. So if you take the same amount on day 2 as you took day 1, you're not going to notice anything. So you typically want to leave at least 48 hours in between those doses. And look, there are some.
Why does that happen? Why does that happen? What's
it has something to do with it's the serotonin system. Okay. It's related because it's so serotonergic. There's something that happens with the serotonin system.
So you're saying though, like in the case of an extreme case, if someone took microdose every single day, there would be a flat line in their change of consciousness. They'd just be like the same consciousness all the time, and it would be nothing. Just you pee it out.
Yeah, there would be essentially a tolerance buildup. There may be some benefits on neurogenesis, like Paul Stamets, this well-known mycologist. His microdosing protocol is 4 days on, 3 days off, because he believes there's some sort of building up that you're doing from a neurogenesis perspective. But he recommends doing that with lion's mane and niacin.
Let me ask you a question.
Wait, Ralph. Let me finish that.
Go ahead.
Well, my preferred microdose is with LSD. And so with LSD, especially no more than twice a week is what I tell people because it's so stimulating. Man. LSD doesn't have the same body load. You must
like Led Zeppelin.
And I like Led Zeppelin. I also the cognitive benefits are greater with LSD. So it's better for cognition, it's better for creativity, and it's better for productivity.
But how do you
Marcus, I'll ask the question. I'm sorry.
The hell, what are you going to ask? Come on.
The question is this: who is the right candidate for someone that may be like, why would you say, all right, this person should do mushrooms, this person should do LSD, this person shouldn't do any of it? Like,
he's still self-centered. He's really just trying to.
I'm trying to understand. For the person that's listening to this, that's thinking maybe I should do this, maybe not. What is the catalyst for finding the right person and the right drug?
So anyone who has a family history of psychosis, schizophrenia, even I would say certain personality disorders, should be very mindful of taking any amount of psychedelic, whether it's a macrodose or even a microdose. So family history of psychosis or schizophrenia is a big no-no. If someone has a background of addiction, they should be really mindful of starting to microdose because from a psychological perspective, there could be a tendency to, again, fall back into that. It depends, of course, how long they've been sober. If they've done other plant medicine work, like with ayahuasca, right? There's a lot of context there that's relevant, but that's something that I would say it's helpful to be aware of. Usually how it breaks down is people who have a history of using Prozac, Zoloft, SSRIs will typically prefer to microdose with psilocybin because it's a natural substance and because they've had a lack of success with these conventional psychiatric medications. They have a predisposition to the sort of natural substance of psilocybin, whereas those who are more interested in creativity, cognition, sort of mental performance, LSD tends to be the more common.
Scary to me. I mean, hearing the words LSD, speaking openly, freaks me out a little bit. It just freaks me out a little bit.
Well, you jumped subjects, Ralph, because I think that the first aspect of it is defining what it is and what it's supposed to do. And so in that clarity, I think that you would decide for yourself rather than looking for everybody for an answer, because this isn't heart surgery. We're not, giving you a lethal dose of something. At the very worst, you could have a bad trip, so to speak, probably never on a microdose, but let's assume that you had a special case and you just didn't like what you were seeing, or you lost control of your mind and it created heightened anxiety, or you were looking at your hands and you suddenly realized you're disintegrating. You might not like any of that. Unlikely on a microdose, probably, and to have that depth. But in essence, for me, what I believe is, while the microdose is what we're discussing, the sort of put your toe in the proverbial water. It's the real hallucination. It's the real dosage where the medicine actually can do the thing that you're coming to it to do, which is to dramatically alter your previous reality. And under the right circumstances and with a little bit of luck, the practitioner in that moment will have a profound experience of being present in the moment, which is the same thing as being enlightened, becoming awake. The nature of reality is right now. You experience that. And you're defenseless. If the medicine is in your body, you're defenseless against some of the euphoric feelings that it's saying, I don't care how closed your heart is, motherfucker. I'm open that shit right now. And you start looking at the sky and going, how did the color blue happen? And when you have those experiences, especially when you're more mature, you could put them in a context that's healing, not just, being in, Alice in Wonderland on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And so that's the essence of what this entire show is about. The essence of what taking psilocybin is, or whether you go to ayahuasca retreat or breathing or meditation, is that we need intervention of some kind to ground ourselves in the present moment, and to practice focus and concentration, and to learn how to alleviate our anxiety, which sends us into a hyper panic state. And so the medicines are just a tool to pry people open. That's all they are.
To be clear, Marcus, because of your background with addiction is why you would never microdose. Is that a fair assessment?
You know what? I make my own choices. It's not a never. It's whatever I choose to do, whatever the path takes me. I'm fascinated in human psychology. I watch everything I can on YouTube. And of course, since my wife used these things, of course, I'm going to listen to everything. And I'm going to use my own experience, and then I'm going to compare. And I'm going to say, I was actually talking to a shaman yesterday who I really respect, just randomly talking to him. And I asked him a question because he told me he was having some stress. I said, do you think the grand master meditators that live in the foothills or the mountains of the Himalayas, who meditate 4 or 5 hours a day and who walk with total consciousness, do you think they need any type of plant medicine to arrive at what we all want, which is nirvana and euphoria and a sense of oneness and a sense of comfort and ease? And he said, absolutely not. So what we established is we don't need this substance. It's not like air that you breathe. It's a intervention substance. It's a medicine. Sorry for taking up the whole show. And I just want to be clear, because we're not telling people to take psilocybin, but I also want to be clear. I know that shit works.
Here's the question, though, then. Let me interrupt you. And I'm going to ask you this to the doctor.
Yes.
So let's say I take it and I have this wonderful experience and I'm so happy and it's been opening my mind and wow, did I have a great experience, right? How do I avoid not going back to that when normally maybe I would just persevere if I'm having a stressful day or I'm in a bad place? Normally I would do things like meditate, like go run, like do something to recenter myself, versus now I see an easy way out. Let me microdose. Let me do that. Like, how do you get someone to not start taking the quote unquote easy way out? Paul.
Is that me? Okay. It wasn't sure. So I think it's the context of the framing of this is how it can be useful. These are the situations in which it can be helpful, that it's not necessarily something that is going to quote unquote fix your problems. So I would always say, if someone's expressing what you just expressed to me, I'd say go spend 2 hours in the woods, or go do a float tank, or go do some breath work. If someone is saying, hey, I've been in a rut for like 3 or 4 weeks and I just can't get out of it, I might say, hey, you might benefit from taking a low dose of a psychedelic. And I think there's a middle path here, right? So we think of microdosing microdosing is seen as you're taking LSD or psilocybin 2 or 3 times a week for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It's a protocol, right? Whereas these more spiritual high dose experiences you're doing in ceremony, it's a ritual. You might do it once a year or once every 6 months. I think there's a middle way where there are plenty of people who, maybe they go to talk therapy once a week and they take a low dose of a psychedelic as part of that talk therapy to enhance the overall effectiveness of the talk therapy. So I think another way to frame it is looking at psychedelics as an adjunct, even microdosing as an adjunct to deepen the practice.
What is
to
the
improve
microdose, by
its
the way?
overall impact. What is a microdose?
1/5, 1/10 of a normal dose?
1/10. Normally 1/10.
And is it based on your height, your weight, your age, or is it just a normal dose of this much? Here's a microdose amount.
So LSD would be anywhere from 10 to 20 micrograms. Psilocybin mushrooms anywhere from what I would say 50 milligrams to 250 milligrams. The biggest factor in that is age and if someone has a prior history of SSRIs. So I almost know without a fact, if someone has been on SSRIs for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they're over the age of 50, their microdose is going to be maybe 3 to 4 to 5 times as much as mine. So I think sensitivity has very little to do with height and weight, has a lot more to do with age and previous history of.
Well, I would add to that and say that it's the more intoxicated the body becomes, the harder it is to get it to react to something.
The less sensitivity there is. Right.
Exactly. and that could happen at any age. It's definitely the reason it's age is I don't believe in the decline of the body. I just believe in the buildup of toxins. So even someone who's 50, if they go through a rigorous program over time to clean up their system, they'll become as sensitive as a child again to any substance, noise even. It's not, it's just a transformation that the body takes it. I'm sure you understand because you look like you understand.
Well, and that's what Michael Pollan talked about in How to Change Your Mind. He's like, because he went through all these experiences himself and he was in his late 50s. And he's like, I think the greatest potential of psychedelics is helping people in their 50s and 60s who have been in the same ruts their whole life to actually realize there's a new way that you can approach things. Because when you work with psychedelics, especially at higher doses, and they've seen this in brain scans, it literally transforms your brain into that of a child's.
So why not DMT, by the way? Like, why is that not in the conversation? Isn't that also a psychedelic?
So there's 2 forms of DMT. So there's NN-DMT, which is in ayahuasca, which is what Joe Rogan talks a lot about and Terrence McKenna talked about, which is when you smoke it, you see aliens and fractals and things like that. And then there's 5-MeO-DMT, which is from a toad, and it's a venom that you smoke. And the challenge with smoking both of these is just that it's super, super intense. So if someone's pretty new to this and you're recommending they go into this first thing, there's a high likelihood that they'll have a traumatizing experience, that there will be sort of a bad trip or paranoia. So again, in sort of the vein of ensuring that the experiences are safe and effective for people who are working with psychedelics, I typically say if you're going to work with DMT, wait a few years. Okay. Because the experience can be very intense and it's not something to just try out for fun in most cases.
Are there other
Ralph, I don't like the idea of DMT or LSD because just simple, let's get back down to food. It's processed food. These aren't natural substances the way roots from I don't know what ayahuasca is.
Yeah, but hemlock is natural, so why don't we just
no, hold on. That's sorry. Don't drink you'll divert this whole show because that has no logic. It's a substance. You already understand the concept of natural medicines, correct?
Yes.
Do you know of any off the top of your head? Think of a natural remedy that you know is effective.
Off the top of my head, maybe ginger helps my tummy.
Okay, good. So there's another substance. Let's think of something more like because this is difficult. Let's think of something more difficult, like imagine if you hadn't eaten food right to the brink of death. You were, say, you had water, but you were 9 days in with no food.
Okay.
So now any type of nutrition is a benefit. So let's just look at that and say there are substances that we rely on to fix the problem that's happening, which is we're falling apart and we're dying without that substance. Mm-hmm. That is easy one for you to look at because you can see the result on the physical body and the energy you create with calories. But there are also disruptions in the brain. There's disruptions in the patterns that we've laid out through our memories, through our experiences. There's broken hardware on the brain.
But that's what the doctor that had the ketamine therapy came on.
For sure.
Said that you can see in a scan that the ketamine repairs those pathways.
So what you could say is that there are 2 types of these medicines. One are sacred plants and nothing else. They're probably cooked down. They're boiled down for days on end to extract their potency, to take the substance that's the thing that acts on your psychology out. Some of them can be just eaten the way they are. The substance is in it. They don't require any cooking. But what you could say is that in their pure form, they require a higher amount than something that's been purified and distilled down and concentrated. And so when it's concentrated and it's been distilled in some type of way, there's other agents that they use for extraction. And so it becomes something different. Certain things are taken away. It's not the whole food, so to speak. So there's different degrees of what we're talking about. That doesn't mean I'm not a believer for what they're doing with CBD in tincture form or THC in tincture form or psilocybin. I just think when people are going to consume this, it has to be very transparent. You have to show everybody every mistake about this, every warning, every possible positive, and that's how informed decisions are made. There can't be any mythology or nonsense.
Paul, how many people come into your program, or at least in your field of view, and then end up saying, you know what, this isn't for me? Does that happen often?
I would say 10% of people either are not, like, they're non-responsive. So they could do even 5, 6, 7 grams of mushrooms, like a high dose, and they'll be non-responsive. There are some people who go through, for example, we have a training program for practitioners who are just like, I'm glad I went through the program, but by going through the program, I learned that this is not my path, because working with psychedelics and plant medicines, while catalytic and impactful, can also be quite challenging and a lot to navigate. And then there are certain people who are just, they have a very traumatic or difficult experience with psychedelics, and something gets pulled up. This is, a lot of what we do, a lot of that can be mitigated by set and setting, appropriate dose levels. So people who come through our programs, that is rarely, if ever, the case. But I hear a lot of stories of people who did acid at a dead show, or a bunch of mushrooms at a rave, or they were drunk with friends and they tried psychedelics for the first time, and they just had a really awful experience. And so,
or Bufo, look at Bufo. What
they get loaded up with Bufo.
Have you seen?
That's
Bufo?
and that's 5-MeO. Yeah, 5-MeO.
But you're familiar with
Bufo.
it.
Oh yeah.
I watched. I never heard the word. What is
Bufo? Do you tell them what Bufo is? Good. I don't even.
Bufo alvarius is the Sonoran desert toad. It's the toad venom that I was talking about earlier.
Actually, we had brought that up on the show once before. I didn't know that's what it was called.
It's not the
most powerful psychedelic.
I'm saying
it's not the NMDMT from ayahuasca.
No. Right? It's not the. There's another frog medicine that they use. It's much more mild. Combo. Different. It's not. The Bufo is an instantaneous death that lasts for about 20 seconds.
15,
also, it's a very silly name. It just sounds weird.
Well,
Bufo.
yeah, but I'm saying
it's the Latin name.
Isn't boofing the term
and
boofing
from
is
what
putting drugs up your ass? So that's
which I've done with ketamine. It's pretty interesting.
Oh,
what I asked and observed when I saw this was that there was no specific ancestral instructions on how to serve that plant medicine, and so they were literally had it in a glass crack pipe with that propane torch, and that's what the experience looks like. And I said, that does not look right. No, I'm not judging. I said that does not look like what I see in ayahuasca ceremonies, what you see in mushroom ceremonies, peyote ceremonies. They're very, very gentle, mild when they're done under the like groups with shamans. They're music festivals. They play, there's people there to help you. You could sit and talk. If the experience gets deep, someone will walk up to you and sing you a song and help you to breathe. You see the weakest personalities do these things with incredible success. So the least of my worries would be with someone like you having any type of traumatic experience. If you prepare yourself properly for it, really what it's going to do is it's going to set up a mirror for you, and you're just going to be looking at yourself from every angle that you don't see in your regular life.
So let me ask you this, Paul. It seems like we're focusing on 3 things, which is setting, dosage, intention. Those seem to be the 3 primary prongs to doing something like this, right? And while we can handle the setting and the dosage, I don't know if I can remove my skepticism and my contrarianism that is just embedded in with me, which may alter my intention. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, what would be the rooting of this? I would ask, like, where does the skepticism and contrarianism come from?
For me personally, I think I'm generally pretty happy. Marcus doesn't think I am.
Don't say that. That's not nice, because when we started the show, you were unhappy on your own.
Yeah, I've made
and I've said to you, the show's boring now because you literally fixed your problems in the last 3 years on your own. Yeah. And so we don't have anything to talk about with you.
That's why I'm saying, like, but I'm more. So also, just so you know, Paul, what I did we just lost him, I think, in a good smile. We lost him. He's there, but he's not there. There he's back. Okay. So, Paul, for a long time, and I'm still down to do this, I would be the guinea pig that would go out and try a colonic, go try whatever cold therapy, whatever. Some of these things I've kept in my life because I felt different. Some of them I didn't, so I don't do them anymore. I've lost 100 pounds. I run 25, 30 miles a week. I'm generally in a better mood. I'm eating better, blah, 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 all that shit. Great. Meditate every day, all that shit.
Welcome to humanity.
So the question is, like, I would do it more for the show. That's why, as opposed to thinking I'm going to get something out of this that's going to be life-altering. So maybe that is not the right intention to try a microdose of this. Unless someone can convince me, oh, no, you are a great candidate for this because of A, B, and C. Maybe I'm kidding myself and I'm not really in a good mood. I don't know.
You're a great candidate because you're an asshole. That's it. Take the pill.
I am an asshole. That I know.
Well, so my question would be, what would convince you? Is it scientific evidence? Is it
science helps a lot? But again,
close friends,
even from what you're saying and what Marcus is saying, as I said, the 3 prongs, dosage and setting we can control. I don't feel in a space where I need guidance to feel better. But maybe and just being objective, maybe I'm in denial. I don't fucking know. How do you know that? If you're in denial, you don't know.
I mean, my framing on it is like clinical research shows that psychedelics, even at low doses, increase something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is a precursor to neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity.
You're the only one that says microdosing does that. Everybody else says macrodosing is the only way. Everyone we've brought on has shit on microdosing.
So if he's wrong, then
the clinical research, I can point to the clinical research from Harriet.
But also in your defense, if the macrodosing is the only way, then at worst, the microdosing is just expensive urine. That's all. So it's actually saying that it's actually safer microdosing, and that's right. That's the debate, right?
Well, why can't I just buy expensive
go ahead.
urine
Let our friend. I just wanted to say that in the defense of microdosing.
So if that's the thing that you're looking for, right? It's like, how do you change and adapt and essentially weave in new behavioral patterns that are supportive? I would say psychedelics are incredibly helpful at that. Now, this whole debate on there's no clinical research to support microdosing is frankly, it's simply not true. In fact, there was research just published 2 weeks ago out of New Zealand from a company called Mind Biotherapeutics that's doing LSD microdosing research that showed significant improvements in mood, depression.
Well, energy, in your defense, we've not had anyone on about LSD. It's been mostly mushrooms and ketamine where they said that they poo-pooed microdosing.
Oh, I mean, there's been no research on.
No one wants to pay. Nobody's paying.
And there's been very little, if any, research on mushroom microdosing. So I think that's part of the challenge. It's just it's so prohibitively expensive still because of all the bureaucracy. But it's been really difficult to get a lot of research published on it.
The only research that's available is from commercial industry more than it's not. I wouldn't say it's
academic institutions.
Yeah, because it's like. You're not going to get funding to prove that space-time is not fundamental, that consciousness is. It's just not a subject that leads to anything. It's too, so that the type of research that we're talking about here, Ralph, that you need, it comes from, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. I'm not a fucking doctor, okay? I'm just an opinion, man, from knowing you for 200 years. That what it comes from is a fundamental need for you to be in control. It has to do. 1,000%. And so the thought process here for you is that you're suddenly going to be out of control. And that is the anxiety.
Let me ask you this. Being that both of these drugs in New York City are illegal, if I wanted to even dip my toe in this, do I have to fly to Portugal? What am I doing to if I wanted to try this and microdose something, even if it is just for the purpose of the show and the open-mindedness that maybe it's going to make me feel better?
So that's a good question. So you've seen the recent cannabis laws in New York, how there's like one legal store, but 1,400 illegal stores that are now selling cannabis. A lot of those illegal cannabis stores are selling mushroom.
Right, but I don't want to get it from an unknown source. I don't know if it's fucking good quality. What the hell am I? I'm not going to I would never do that.
No, that's that I wouldn't recommend that for you either, because you're going to the candy store. I'm sorry, and you're buying processed food.
Right.
I'm sorry, because it is what it's.
I would never do it in a million years.
It is not. I'm sorry. It is not the way those medicines were being intended by whoever discovered them and wrote the rules. If you believe in such a thing, it's not.
Agree. So let's move on. Let's move on from that offer.
Do you agree with that, Paul?
I would agree with that. Yeah, because you don't know what's in it. You don't know. A lot of these people pass it off as mushrooms, and it's actually a synthetic. Right. So
no fucking way I'm doing that. So let's skip that one.
So you either got to know someone who has really good, let's say, microdosing supplements that you can trust, or the Netherlands is really the one place where you can go and you can legally purchase psilocybin microdoses to work with. Canada, it's becoming more legal-esque. Like there are shops now in Vancouver, Toronto, and Ottawa that are openly selling mushrooms, microdoses of mushrooms.
I like the term legal-esque.
Yeah, legal, gray market.
Legal.
So a lot of it though is like you got to know someone still at this point in time,
right? And
that's becoming easier and easier to do. But there's I started a project a couple of years ago called the Microdosing Collective, which is a 501c3 nonprofit in California. We're actually lobbying the state of California to include this in their new state legislature. So California is on the verge of passing a bill to legalize therapeutic psychedelics. And so we're working to include microdosing within that bill. But I would say, if I'm honest, we're still probably 5 to 7 years away from having legal microdoses available to people who want to work with psychedelics. So still some time.
I think it's a great subject. I really do, because, what I've come to understand about just psychology and my own nature is how difficult it is to take knowledge and transform it into something that we can feel, and how difficult it is to take some of our most deeply ingrained patterns that involve anxiety and the way we view the world. We could miss out on having a really productive life and being, truly in the moment and truly enjoying the possibilities that we can experience. And so I believe in these things the way I believe in meditation. I believe that their intervention, somebody with a milder childhood trauma experiences, someone with a different mindset doesn't necessarily need them. They can, just hike more or something like that and get the same feeling. But there are, let's just be clear, when you said who you would rule out as candidates for the higher doses, you said, certain family
microdosing and higher doses as well. Yeah.
You ruled out 97% of the planet, right? Because who doesn't have trauma and family history of some kind? It seems almost as if we all have that. And the big shift here is that, Ralph, what I think you would experience is, if you felt comfortable in any way, is I think that you can experience a deeper sense of connectedness, like oneness, like, oh my God, I'm just in the soup.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy it in the back alley, but I would say that I would.
I'm saying that the feeling that I just described, that real feeling of connectedness, it's very hard to shake that when you come down off of any type of mind-altering substance. You carry that because you experienced it.
Well, I'm going to go ahead,
and then experiencing just joy and euphoria. How often do you experience joy and euphoria?
Whenever I'm having sex with a 22-year-old.
I'm serious. Besides banging, how often?
No, I feel it pretty often. At the end of every run, I feel euphoric.
The runner's high.
Yeah. So
I would look at psychedelics are just another flavor. They're another potential experience. They're incredibly safe, and research shows that, especially for these higher doses, they can be incredibly effective. So I look at it as like, if you don't do it, you're kind of silly not to, because of how safe.
Don't be a
and how
pussy. In
much
other words, I get it. Yeah. Don't be a pussy.
More or less.
I would say this though. Also, to put
you would get drunk for your SDR show.
Yeah, I'm
and
saying.
fucking
By the way,
shoot golf balls out of your ass. I mean, that's really
calm down. I don't like thinking of myself as so myopic anyway, so I'm open to it, but I'm only open to a microdose from a trusted source. I would do it, but I'm not going to buy it on a back alley or from some dude that I think is reliable.
How about on eBay?
Yeah, or the dark web or something. But so I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate you taking the jabs back and forth about what we've read and whatnot. We can follow you at paulaustin.co, at the Third Wave on Instagram, at paulaustin3w as well. Third Wave, I get it. Is there anything else you want to plug before we wrap this up?
We have a 45-day microdosing experience that starts in April. So if any listeners are like, I basically do group coaching for 6 weeks, and folks go through a 6-week microdosing protocol, and I help them dial in their dose level. We have specific programming and curriculum that goes along with it. So if any folks are listening and they want to like join a group cohort and microdose with a bunch of other great people, that starts April 22nd.
It's on your website on paulaustin.co?
It's on Third Wave.
That's brilliant. You know what? That's
Yeah,
fucking brilliant. I never would have thought of that, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that
It seems like everyone's going to end up having sex with each other on some.
No,
trip
you know
like
what?
that. That's I think.
You know what? Anyone who makes fun of self-help and someone seeking to improve the way they view reality, that's exactly how they're supposed to react. They're supposed to laugh at it. They're all woke. Whatever. You know what? Great. Stay in your dark, ignorant cave for the rest of your life.
I already said I'm willing to try it.
I'm not talking about you. You're at least open-minded. You're at least open-minded.
Okay, fair enough. All right, follow me everywhere at I Am Ralph Sutton. My other podcast, The SDR Show, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll Show, currently number 56 on iTunes. I saw that today. Pretty fucking cool.
That's great.
And the Good Sugar store is on the corner of 3rd Avenue and 69th Street. You can't miss the giant yellow sign. I put a video up yesterday, Marcus, because I was there this weekend. It was so busy. It was great to see. It made me very happy how busy it was this weekend. So come down to 3rd and 69th. No single-use plastics, all vegan food. Do something good for the environment and your body at the same time. Thank you, Paul, and we'll be back next week with another edition of the Good Sugar Podcast.